A death row inmate who stabbed and killed a pregnant woman and her 4-year-old daughter 26 years ago will be executed at 6 p.m. tonight in the state of Florida. 47-year-old Richard Knight is scheduled to be executed by lethal injection today, May 21st, and the process is supposed to start at 6 p.m. He was sentenced to death for the 2000 murders of 24-year-old Odessia Stevens and her 4-year-old daughter, Hanessia Mullings. Back in June of 2000, Richard was living in Coral Springs, Florida, with his cousin's girlfriend, Odessia Stevens, and their 4-year-old daughter, Hanessia Mullings, and Odessia was also 6 weeks pregnant at the time. Around this time, Richard's cousin and Odessia had both tried several times to get Richard to leave their home. After all, this was their family home and they were expecting another baby and they did not want him living there anymore. But Richard refused to leave, and this caused a lot of arguments between them. On the night of June 27th, after Richard's cousin had left for work, Richard continued to argue with Odessia about the living arrangements, with Odessia standing firm that she wanted him out of the house. And after a short back-and-forth argument, Richard then became so angry that he went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. Around 12:20 a.m. that same night, an upstairs neighbor reported hearing several really loud thumping noises coming from downstairs, followed by 2 female voices and then a child crying, so they immediately called 911. When the first officer arrived and started to walk up to the apartment, he did notice that some of the lights were on inside and the bedroom window was just slightly cracked open. He tried knocking on the door, but nobody answered, so he started to walk around the building again, and this time he noticed that now all of the lights had been turned off and that bedroom window that was cracked was now completely open with the blind sticking out of it. It looked almost as if someone had just escaped through the window. When the officer began looking through the windows, he immediately noticed that there was blood everywhere, and when he looked through the master bedroom window, he saw 4-year-old Hanessia curled up in a fetal position, lying in front of the closet in a pool of blood. When the officer walked inside of the home, he also found Odessia lying on the floor in the living room in a pool of blood. It was reported that Odessia had been strangled and stabbed 21 times, and Hanessia had been strangled and stabbed 5 times, and both of them had defensive wounds and did try to put up a fight. When the second officer arrived on scene, she noticed that Richard had been standing outside near some hedges approximately 100 yards away from the building, and again, this was in the middle of the night, so she thought this was really odd. She called him over to ask him some questions, and while she was talking to him, she noticed that he had scratch marks on his chest, a scrape on his shoulder, fresh cuts on his hands, and blood on his shirt. When she asked what he was doing out in the middle of the night, he told the officer that he just went for a jog, but he was wearing dress clothes and dress shoes, and he was also visibly wet as if he had just gotten out of the shower. And when the officer asked him where he lived, he told the officer that he lived in that apartment where 2 people had just been murdered, but he didn't have a key to get inside. Since the police were obviously incredibly suspicious of him, Richard was arrested at the scene less than 1 hour after the 911 call was placed. Inside of the apartment, police found a set of clothes in Richard's room that were covered in blood. It was later confirmed that both Odessia and Hanessia's blood was found on that clothing that was in his room. It was also confirmed that Odessia's blood was found on the clothing that he was wearing when he was arrested and on his hand. And fingernail scrapings that were taken from Odessia did contain Richard's DNA, so she was able to scratch him during the attack. The day after he was arrested on June 29th, Richard ended up confessing to another inmate that he was sharing a cell with, telling him exactly what had happened. He told him that him and Odessia had gotten into an argument that night about him moving out again, and he got so angry that he went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, went back to the bedroom, and stabbed both Odessia and Hanessia. After he killed them, he took a shower and changed his clothes, and shortly after getting out of the shower is when the police officer arrived, so as the police officer was at the front door, he escaped through the window. This inmate did testify against Richard at his trial, and with this, along with all of the other evidence, the jury found him guilty of the murders and he was sentenced to death in 2006. He has, of course, attempted to appeal his sentence, just like every single death row inmate, but every single appeal has been denied, including the most recent one from just last Friday. So that means Richard Knight will be executed by lethal injection at 6 p.m. tonight in the state of Florida. Really quickly before I end this video, I do want to take a moment to send my deepest and sincerest condolences to any loved ones of Odessia and Hanessia. I am so sorry for your loss, and I do truly hope that you're able to find some sort of peace after what happens today.